Welcome to this podcast from Stratfor, leader in global intelligence.
Today, as Afghans go to the polls for their country's presidential election, the Karzai government asked both local and international media not to report the rising tide of violence, for fear the news will dissuade people from voting at all. The Taliban vows to use violence to disrupt the election. And this morning, gunmen stormed a bank building just a few hundred meters from the presidential compound. There were explosions and a shootout, and at least 3 people died. Welcome to Stratfor. I'm Colin Chapman. Western diplomats are hoping against hope there'll be a high turnout, despite the violence. Here's what Britain's ambassador to Kabul had to say in an interview with Australian television.
Well, I don't think we should underestimate the resilience of the Afghan people. This country has been through a great deal over the last 25 years, and there were many similar threats to the elections in 2004 and 2005. And these are a tough people, and I believe they'll turn out because they want to have a stake in the future and they want to be making the decisions about their government. So I think we can expect a pretty strong turnout. And of course what we're hoping for from these elections is the reinforced political authority for the next president, and the next president really elected according to the will of the Afghan people.
Ambassador Mark Sedwell is one of those who feel the contest between Hamid Karzai, the existing president, and one of his strongest opponents, Foreign Minister Abdullah, could go to a second round, which would delay the conclusion for 2 months and possibly lead to still more violence. The ambassador is sanguine about this.
There could be a runoff, and that's the process here. And I don't think it's necessarily so much a period of instability. If the first round's successful, we get 2 candidates coming out of it with a clear lead, but one of them hasn't made it over 50%, then the people can rally around a robust democratic process. One thing it would do is convince people the process was real. You'd have 2 political leaders heading into a second round. Most Afghans would want to rally around that process. So it could be a positive as well. Of course there are risks around it. Of course there's risks of violence. But in the end we've got to manage that. The choice here is not between having a perfect election and having the election that we're facing. It's between having this election and having no election. And it's much better that we have this election, that we help the democratic process here take another step forward. It's going to be rough and ready around the edges, there's no question about that, but it's still better to have it than to abandon the process altogether, and that's true whether it's 1 round or 2.
Stratfor analyst Kamran Bokhari says that attempts by the West to bring Afghanistan to some semblance of a democratic process are not going to work. He's talking with Marla Dial.
If you just look at the way the alliances are set up, Karzai is trying to guarantee his re-election, and the means by which he's doing that is the same old politics of warlordism, that he's going to these strong men, promising them a stake in the future government in return for supporting his candidacy as president. Business as usual, there's no change. The people who are trying to bring about a change, the people who are challenging Karzai, they have made some significant improvement in their own standing in the country, but it's not enough to completely roll back this culture of warlordism. Obviously, there's a lot of young people in the country who want to put the past behind them and want to move forward in terms of having a bit more reformed political system where the vote does count, and there's development work and whatnot. And Abdullah and the third largest candidate, former finance minister Ashraf Ghani, both of these men have taken upon themselves this mantle of reform, this trying to rally people who are opposed to this politics of warlordism. But they're not able to really put a dent into this culture, because if you look at the geography of the country, there is this method to the madness of warlordism. I mean, each warlord is representing a specific ethnic group, and that ethnic group is based in a certain geographic location in the country. Therefore, it's something that's almost geopolitically hardwired into the fabric of the country. Central rule or Western-style governance is not going to make much headway in this country, where everything at the end of the day means that who's the top gun in your area, and then how does your top gun then connect with the larger totem pole and then the structure that is erected around it. And I think, at a time when the West is trying to push some form of democracy, they're also very mindful. The Obama administration and their European allies and others in NATO are not ignorant of this fact that ultimately, if we want some sort of stable security environment in the country. It's not going to happen by just sidelining warlords. They may try to strike a balance that, all you warlords, why don't you come in this sort of power-sharing formula that's rooted in some form of parliamentary democracy and that has some cultural connections to the Loya Jirga culture of Afghanistan. But ultimately, it is the warlords that are calling the shots. It is up to them whether they want to participate in this superstructure and then maintain the peace.
Mala there, talking with Kamran Bokhari and ending our podcast. At Stratfor, we will of course be following today's events and their outcome closely. Please stay in touch with us. I'm Colin Chapman at Stratfor.